Hey everyone, this is a very special episode as I'm joined by an old friend and mentor as we break down one of the big games that's just launched, which is of Division 2. Hey everyone, you're joining me, your host, Max Pears. And as I said, this is a very special one as I'm joined by, I'm going to give him a grand intro because it only seems fitting for him. This is my previous mentor, a man so smart he makes quantum physics look like child's play, a man who has passion going on for the games industry as almost as long as I have been alive, making him feel old. And finally, a man who has a laugh so loud it makes thunder sound like a kitten purring. This is the one, the only, the grand master, Simon Cooper.
Hey Max, how are you doing? I'm sorry I couldn't laugh on cue there.
It's alright. I feel it'll happen at some point. Let's not
Maybe.
Force it.
We'll see.
Okay. I gotta bring up my A game in comedy now.
Yeah.
It's not very good, so I'm going to disappoint everyone with this one. But how are you doing, man? You alright?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Good. So for those of you who don't know, Simon is, as I mentioned, my previous mentor. He is one of the guys who helped me a lot in my developing years, as well as crushed me down spiritually on multiple times, because that was his role. And he is the technical director now, I believe, at Ubisoft Reflections.
Technical director for level design, specifically.
Well, okay, I messed that one up. So that's where research comes in.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Simon is a great person and great designer, and I thought it was great to have him here. We've spoken about this for like a while now, about you coming on, so it's...
I think you asked me before you recorded the first one. I think you were sending out feelers like, would you be up for it? And I was like, yeah.
I mean, man, like, this cheese, okay, yeah, that's a while back. But the stars have now aligned, and here we are, finally. So it's good. So yeah, you've been in the industry for how long now then, mate?
Just coming up 14 years now. I
Jeez,
started at Reflections in 2005, and I've never left.
Oh, man,
Clearly.
No, man, that's crazy in a way, But no, that's amazing as well, because you said got an absolute wealth of knowledge. How does it feel to be working in the industry for that long now? And you've seen a lot of changes.
Well, when I first started, we were working on driver parallel lines, and we used to make our mission scripts in a plugin for 3D Max.
Wow.
We used to play on consoles that were attached to like 14-inch CRT TVs.
Wow.
Like everything's changed so much now. Like we actually have debuggers and don't have to rely on like printout text for everything. Just being able to load up the game and enter game mode on your PC has been an absolute revelation. Even if that is like a 10-year-old revelation at that point. But you know what I mean. It's huge changes since then.
Yeah, man, no, that's amazing. And just like I said, the amount of stuff that you've seen. And I was going to say, we'll start it off with the basic question of, how did you get into games, to where you now are, from that?
It was an absolute fluke, if I'm honest. So I went to Sunderland University back in the day. I did a degree in computing. And for my dissertation, I did some research into object recognition algorithms. And it was part of the artificial intelligence group that they were running there. And there were about 6 or 7 of us doing similar topics with that group. Towards the end of the dissertations, they said, look, there's a bunch of you all seem to be interested in this. Would you be interested in a master's if we set one up? And we're all like, well, we don't have any plans of growing up. So yeah, why not do a master's? So they set it up. I went and did a master's, and at the end of that, um, I was trying to get a job, and everywhere I looked, I heard one of two things. One was you're overqualified, or you don't have enough experience. And so I was hearing the same litany of things for about 8 months. And
Wow.
then I was off to visit my old flatmate, Jason,
Hmm?
and had to get a bus into town and then a train, but the bus was late. So I missed my train. I walked into town when I finally got there, picked up a newspaper, sat on the train a bit later, and I'm flicking through and I see this advert for Reflections. And I thought, well, I've tried everything else. Why not give this a punt? And, landed it.
The rest is there. Magic.
Yeah, the rest
That's
is
so
history.
strange. Like,
Yeah.
if you would have, if you got the train on time, would you have looked at the newspaper?
I wouldn't have bought the newspaper.
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
would have just never happened. It's like a sliding doors kind of moment.
Yeah.
And it it's just so weird to see the moments that your life can pivot around. And
Mm.
I've in some ways I feel bad because there's so many people trying to get into this industry and they're doing everything they can. And for me, I didn't even know there were studios in the northeast of England.
Yeah.
I It just never crossed my mind as a thing I could do. But to be fair, back then there weren't that many games degrees or anything like that. It was still people did just computer science or something, and then got into games through you know
Yeah.
probably through a bit more planning than I did, I guess. But yeah,
No, man, I think it's still it's amazing that that all happened. And it's not by coincidence. You still worked hard and still got put in preparation.
it,
And
yeah. So the thing that got me in was that I had the masters. I knew the masters was specifically in AI, so they knew that was a skill that could be developed if I wanted to move into programming or something like that. So yeah, it was because of the work, not just luck, but luck was a huge factor.
yeah, man, no, that's still because I didn't even realize you had a master's. There's still stuff I'm learning about Scoopinator. Trying to not sound like a clinging ex girlfriend or something when I say that.
Don't hide it, Max.
As I say, so then how is it? Well, as I say, a lot of people know about level design and game design primarily, but can you maybe expand on what is technical level design then, mate?
So technical level design is uh, it crosses a few different roles really. So part of it is supporting the level designers, so being there to help them with any day-to-day issues they have, like they've got a bug they can't fix, or an issue with the nav mesh where it just doesn't generate the way they're expecting, or something like that. The other side is providing uh, tools or ingredients that they might use in their levels. So, for example, like if you see any red barrels in Division 2, they will have been set up by a tech LD. We create essentially a template. It gets placed, 15,000 times around the level, and that's that. But you make it once, you fix it once. And the point of having that in tech LD is it makes sure that the setup is right.
Mm.
And if you just gave that to an LD, they probably wouldn't think about all the issues around nav mesh and AI maybe being able to walk through it or not see it's there and things like that. On top of that, we do things like training, make sure that all of the new LDs know how to do the job, use the tools we've got, and also provide reviews. So, reading through the scripts they've done and giving feedback
Yeah.
on the things that they have to change. It's amazing how easy it is to read through a script and see someone do something that will work 9 times out of 10, but then you can see the edge case immediately. Like if the player's not in that volume, and they do something beforehand, they shoot that guy before they hit the volume, suddenly the mission doesn't work anymore. Um,
Yeah.
And it's that's the kind of thing that happens a lot in programming. Like code reviews are totally standard in many studios. Our script reviews aren't as rigorous or common. We basically got time to do one or two per mission throughout development, but I think every single one turned up things that needed to be improved.
Yeah, man. No, that's cool. And yeah, like I think I can't say like how important tech level design is, in my opinion, as well. Just in terms of helping, and as you said, it's an efficient way of setting things up. As you said, with templates for stuff, either for interactions or through maybe certain type of nodes or certain things like that. That I think it's such an important thing. And I guess then, did your AI background did that draw you to go into technical level design, mate?
Not specifically the AI, but the computational side. I think a big part of my experience has been that I've come from programming, and so what I approach scripts in a very kind of systematic way, thinking of things in terms of functions. Can I break something down into a reusable function? And give that out to other LDs to share, or even just the way I problem solve by breaking stuff down and thinking through it step by step. It makes a huge difference, and it's something you don't often see in fresh LDs straight out of uni. They might be great at blocking out spaces, and they might know what they want the player to do and how they think they'll achieve it, but spotting all the edge cases and the weird ways they might have to handle different situations. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to most people, but for me, it's I just think differently, I guess.
It's like a beautiful mind, thinking differently.
I guess.
You were saying about how you break things down and stuff, and what tends to happen when juniors come in is they more focus on the blockout side of things. I guess my question more is, how do you nurture that and how do you encourage that within level designers to make them think more logically?
Well, there's a few things. One is we tend to give the more complicated work to more experienced LDs, so that they're already building on skills that they've got. The more junior LDs get a lot more straightforward tasks where the scripting should be more straightforward. They'll probably be using a lot more. They'll be reusing scripts that have already been written by other people, and they're just connecting stuff together, really. And not to oversimplify what they're not just connecting bits, but we try to make the job as easy as we can for them. And then once they've kind of got grounded in that, we'll just start increasing the challenge of the tasks that they're given. But we do, so things like the script review process is a mentoring opportunity. We don't just feedback, this is wrong. What we feedback is, you could do it better this way. And that there is a way of building someone up to give them more experience. The other thing is, we do try and run training sessions and put information on Confluence. It's really hard to do in the middle of a busy production. Documentation's usually seen as the easiest thing to drop. And it is, because you don't have to ship documentation. But it's actually really important that you keep doing it. So that's one of the things we have to find a balance with production on, is having time to do both the shippable work and the work that will help you improve the team over time. And it also helps other teams that if they join the project and there's already documentation there, because that happens a lot at Ubisoft. People will add other studios onto bigger projects, and if there's already documentation there, then they can just get going on day one without having to relearn everything from scratch.
Yeah, man.
And that
No, I think
sounded
that was.
like I was going on, and I wasn't.
Yeah, no, I was like waiting. I was like, pause for effect, and he's done. There's the laugh. There's the
Yeah.
laugh. But no, man, that's it. And it's I think you're very, very right. I definitely. And do you know what's the other thing with documentation, mate? Is you saying then, because it's the easiest thing to drop, but it is very, very crucial. And I'm gonna edit a bit out, but for those who didn't hear, because it's edited out, Scoop just corrected me on how I phrased a question. But this is a valid point, because Scoop, back when I was a fresh-eyed baby entering in, was Scoop made sure that my emails were written correctly, but also the documentation that I did was presented correctly as well. And I just want to build on your point that it's not just about just having documentation. It's about having documentation that's engaging, because, as you know, mate, like, you get hundreds of emails a day, especially when production's high into gear. And to, like, any documentation you see or email that just seems to not be done correctly, people will skim over and just not bother. So he said it's not only just about doing it, but there is an art form, in my opinion, to doing such documentation as well.
One of the favorite things I've picked up about doing documentation is actually how to make animated GIFs or GIFs, if you prefer, from a video. So you can record the editor in Fraps or something like that, then put down a GIF of just the bit you need to show, and you can, because when you can actually see the pointer and the menu that someone's clicking, it makes it that little bit simpler, but it makes the page come alive as well. And it's not just a book, a dead thing that they're reading.
Mm-hmm.
Not the book should be called Dead Things, but it sparks the interest, and it keeps people looking around the page to see what's going on there.
Yeah, man, no, I agree completely. And, even if it's not just the editor, but something that just pulls people in, because, especially pre-production, you're going to be using other sort of things as reference. So to see something pretty and also moving, again, just pulls people in to read it, which is very, very important. So let that be a lesson that I learnt from Scoop multiple times, and you walk away from this learning, I guess with that one then, mate, like, now that we kind of know... Well, actually, no, I want to ask a question, because we spoke about this briefly on Twitter. And I got the question of, what is it... When people hit to senior, like, where can they spin off to? It was lead, director, and, like, what does that entail? Now, you've, been in the industry for a long time, mate. You've got way more experience than me, and also been in those roles, and like me. So, like, what is, I guess, in your opinion, what is it that a lead does, a director does, all of that? Like, what can you give a bit of a breakdown on that one, mate?
So one thing I've heard a few times around the office is that a director says the what. This is what I want making. And a lead says this is the how. So I think that's an easy little catchphrase. And it's a way of remembering it. But for me, directors will often be responsible for things like the creative brief and saying, this is the thing I want to see in the game. And that should be a pretty wide description. And it gives the designers or the level designers room to actually do the design part of their job. If they're getting told, do exactly this, that's really micromanaging. And sometimes you have to do that. Maybe in a tutorial, you have to get really prescribed on what you're going to do. But for general missions and open world, a director can't really say exactly what they want for every square meter of the world. They will say the world should have this many activities per city block, or this many missions per region, things like that. And then they might say a mission should be this many beats or this kind of duration, and it should feature these things like a theme and a boss. And they might give you the theme, and they might give you some details of the boss, but they wouldn't necessarily have to do that. That could all be up to you, but you've got to figure out your theme, you've got to figure out your boss, and you've got to then probably pitch it to them and say, this is the mission I want to make. And they'll go, yeah, that fits my spec. That's good enough. Go off and make it. Now, a lead would be more engaged on the day-to-day. They would probably review that pitch and knowing what the direction is and having a better understanding of what the director wants, they would help polish it and present it in a way that would work for that director. And then as you're working on it day-to-day, they would be checking in with reviews and just making sure that your layout's meeting those direction guidelines and things like that. The other thing I really wanted to touch on is that certainly at Ubisoft, as an intermediate, your options aren't only senior lead direction moving forward. So those we try to keep parallel tracks. One is management and one is implementation. So you could go to become senior, and then you could become expert and then senior expert. I think the titles might vary a little. So as an implementer, you're just getting good at your job, and you don't have to take on any management responsibility. We might want you to help with mentoring and maybe reviewing and setting standards and things like that. So say if you're early in production, they might get you to show off the high quality corner that everyone's that's going to set the benchmark for everyone. But you're not actually having to actively manage. Whereas you could branch into leadership where you are doing that. But to me, when I very first started at Reflections, that wasn't an option. And it felt like the only way to progress was what I used to think of as dead man's shoes. Like your lead had to leave for you to get their job and to move on. And that is no way to progress in a career, because often in games, we'll hire, 5, 10, however many LDs at one go to work on a project. And then you couldn't just say to all of them, right, one of you can be lead and the rest of you have to stay where you are. So by giving you the option to specialize in what you do and to keep progressing up that chain, that means you should never feel blocked and restricted in where you go. Now, from the core LD position, you could try and transfer into direction as well, probably as an associate director, or you could go up to lead and then across to director, or you could become a technical LD as well. So there's all kinds of interlinking in the job families, and I think that's really key for helping maintain engagement, because people will work harder when they can see where they're going next. And by having that really clear and seeing not just what position they could be in, but what steps they need to get into that position, gives them a really clear way to manage their work and say, I want to be in that pigeonhole. So can you give me more of that kind of work so I can build up in that direction?
Yeah, man, no, I think that's great. And that's a great breakdown, mate. I think that's a good one. I think that's one of the things that I really liked about Ubisoft is it was clear as well, as you said. And not only with that, but they give clear guidelines on what it is you do or is expected of you at this role. So you could always see if you were at this role, maybe performing above, maybe under, but you could see that not only when it came to your reviews or chatting with your lead, but you can measure yourself on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's a great one, mate, and something that, Ubisoft in terms of structure and also Reflections as well just had very, very well, in my opinion. So no, I agree. And also thank you on that one, mate, because like I said I couldn't really answer that question, so it's a good one.
I think just to add to that, if if someone's working in a place where that's not clear, ask your lead. Just say, look, where's my next step? Now, I'm not saying as soon as you get promoted to intermediate, say, how do I become senior? You know, you solidify yourself in that role and get comfortable there. But it's kind of, I do believe it's on the lead to help get everyone up to the next level and make it clear what they need to do or what they're missing to be able to fulfill the next job role. And it just makes such a huge difference. And another thing that you sometimes see in leads is if you're in a lead position, it can be really scary to see a good LD coming up because you're like, they're going to take my job. But really, the job of a lead is to develop the next generation. And it should never be scary to see someone great coming up the lines, because if someone great's coming up, it's your opportunity to help them get even better. And if you're leading a team with excellent people on, that's actually you getting better as well and your team delivering. So I think it's really important on leads and managers to step up to that and not be scared of new blood and fresh faces that are bringing something new, but to really engage them. And it's through that the entire industry will get better. Not your own studio on its own, because that's important too. But we can all bring everyone up.
That was Scoop telling how we first met, how Scoop was nervous when he first met me.
And how I think it was your first week you came up to me and said, how do I get your job?
No, it wasn't get your job. It wasn't. But I did call you out and I said, no, this is it. I remember now. I said to you, because we were having
to Max Pairs.
Because I remember, because I did say something stupid, but it was us when we were chatting about solving this problem. I said, okay. I said to you, if I solve this before you do, I get to be like do your job, be your position for a week or something like that. And I think I solved it in a day and you figured it out in 2 hours or something like that. You waited for me to come over to say that I was done to school me. So yes. Yeah, I think I did plenty of other dumb stuff. That was the thing I wanted to ask about the lead position as well, mate. I think one of the things after seeing some friends get into lead positions and director, you were saying about encouraging people to grow, was the fact that you have to learn to let go as well. As you said with director, you don't just micromanage on certain things. You have to say to give people a chance to figure out their way.
Yeah, it leads a funny position in that it can be different in many studios. And I've interviewed leads who manage, 10, 12 people and also are responsible for making levels in production. And I don't think you can do that very well. Back on Driver San Francisco, I was managing 13 people and trying to do production work. And I was working far too hard, and it was no good for me. But I kept putting pressure on myself, thinking it's what I was supposed to do. But really, I was totally misunderstanding the job. And the job was to get the work done, but that doesn't mean you do it yourself. And that is a big mind shift. And yeah, it's just really hard to get your head around it. I don't think anyone explained it to me. I think I had to learn it for myself, and unfortunately, I learned it quite a hard way because I stepped aside from leading the team when another lead level designer came free from another project, and he took over that team, and I became technical lead, and just kept doing the same production work, but without managing 13 people. And suddenly my life got a whole lot easier. I just got to spend 3 months optimizing a lot of scripts, and that was far easier.
Yeah.
But it's something that we're getting a lot better at Reflections, where when someone steps up to lead, they're getting a lot of training. and support through the process. And I think it's making a world of difference to those people who are stepping up, and also to the existing leads. Like I've been managing people again for like the last 2.5, 3 years, and going to more leadership training. And I've never stepped away from one of those sessions and thought I knew it all. Like there's always stuff I'm picking up and new perspectives and understandings, and I'm pretty sure you've said it on like the most recent podcast, but just never stop learning. It's even as a lead, you might not be learning about level design anymore, but learning about management is a whole new set of challenges. And if you're not up for that, see if you can get into a role where you are just becoming a senior and building up on the thing you do actually enjoy.
Yeah, no, mate, that's some great words. And I actually wanted to say that was one of the things that I always like respected about you, was you never afraid to ask questions. And when I was coming up as the cocky kid, I thought at that level you weren't meant to ask questions, and I think that was a very dumb. I don't know why, but it was a dumb thing I thought. But like he said, there's always something to learn, so always ask those questions. Always,
Never stop learning, dude.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it.
Love games? Love game design? We do too. So why not help us here at Level Design Lobby spread the word? With Patreon, from as little as $1 per month, you can do just that. And new for 2019, we have more reward tiers and even more awesome perks on offer, such as access to our community Discord, level design weekends, exclusive talks by professional designers, one-on-one sessions, and much more. Sound interesting? Then head on over to patreon.com/level design lobby for more information and to pledge your support today. As always, we'd like to say a massive thank you to all the game gurus who've backed us so far. It's thanks to your generous support that we can continue to grow, pursue new opportunities, and bring you new, awesome, and exciting content. So thank you. And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
So now that we've done the brief history on the Scoopinator, let's talk about the latest project you've been working on. Because you've worked on how many titles now? Like
not that many, to be honest. So there was Driver Parallel Lines, which I worked on for about a year or so. If you count it, I then worked on the port of that to the Wii, but it was basically the same project. But I got to work in Barcelona for 10 weeks, so that was pretty cool.
Yes.
Then I worked on Driver San Francisco, and that took about 5 years of my life. Then on to Watch Dogs for a little while, a couple of years. Then Division 1, Division 2. So that's 6 projects if you count the Wii version of Parallel Lines.
You did the that mobile game.
I made a game with some friends available on Android now called Plug It with a little exclamation mark at the end. You might not find it. I don't think it's compatible with modern phones. So at this point, it's probably not visible in the Play Store at all. But that was a fun little game where I've never really seen much like it. I don't play many mobile games anyway. But it was a platformer where you control the character by tilting the phone left or right. So you only ever touch the screen to jump. And as a control mechanism, it kind of works, but it takes a lot of getting used to. You used to see people just properly tilting the phone left or right, and there's actually a bit of sensitivity to it. And if you could get really good at it. But we sold about 5 copies, made it free, about 100 downloads, and I think that's where we learned that marketing is not easy.
God, no.
It's huge.
No.
You just can't jump into that certainly from my expertise. There was no way I could switch around to trying to engage with people in social media and stuff like that. That's just not me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. And also I think, as you're saying then about like the interaction of a phone, it's very different to that of a controller. And it does change things massively, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think for us it was another really clear reminder that you can get so close to a game that what's easy for you isn't for someone else, and what makes sense to you just won't be obvious to someone else. Yeah, stark lesson.
No, man, it's a valid one. This is always one of my favorite lessons I learned because I did an augmented reality game, and the hardest thing for us was making people move the camera.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember, but we'd come up with, as a team, we'd come up with this idea for this like toy box, and you had to shoot off the latches, and it was amazing how just doing that, the simple thing of just, it was 3 latches, because game designer only works in 3.
Yeah.
That changed people and understanding. But as you said, man, it's a whole.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one. And it's difficult as a designer to understand the new ways of it, because when you did that, mobile gaming wasn't as normal as it is now, so.
Yeah, that was years ago now.
Yeah. But yeah, man, no, you've been through a lot. And the most recent one, which you've done, is Division 2. And congratulations to you and the team. Honestly, like I said before, it's a really good game. Really, really. I think it's the best looter-shooter MMO, however you genreize that one or categorize it. It's fantastic.
I appreciate that. The whole team has been just loving seeing reviews. We keep seeing things pinged around the team that are just so great to see, like whether it's Twitch streams or photo mode pictures, reviews on websites, and it's just all been fantastic to see. And I don't think there's much better in a development career than when a game comes out and people are so positive about it. It is just the best feeling.
Yeah, man. No, I think that's great. I think there's a lot that's been improved with it as well since, the first and that. So I think that's amazing to see, And I guess my first question for you then, mate, is like, what is it, maybe one of the biggest takeaways you learned from Division 1 and the DLC that you did to going over to Division 2? What were those lessons for you?
I think firstly was reuse of space. There was a lot of Division 1 that essentially became dead space. You completed the side mission and then there was nothing going on. And we introduced a bounty system which let you see some spaces again through later DLCs and patches. But it was a really tough thing to see areas that we put a lot of time and effort into that suddenly became empty. So we developed systems so that we could really reuse the space. And that is one of the things that's been getting called out so often, is just how alive the world feels. And in comparison to Division 1, that is because we are reusing those spaces for.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. I remember us talking about that at the end of Division 1 a lot. So no, that's good to see. And from you then, mate, how do you feel that the team has evolved? Because obviously there's lessons that you've learned, but there's other lessons that people have taken away. So how do you feel that the team's evolved for this?
Well, specifically, my team didn't exist before. I was technical lead of just myself. When we were starting the Underground DLC, we started looking at building up a team, a technical LD team. And we talked to the guys. We had a couple of guys who were interested and kind of gave them tasks that would help build them up towards a transition into my team for work after Underground. And now I've got a team of 5 people that I'm managing across 2 studios. So suddenly, that's a big change. And the Tech LD team across the project is also much bigger. There's more people in Massive, Red Storm, and we're working with the studio in Sofia as well. So the amount of support we can give the LDs has just got better. And I think, kind of, because I'm full of ego, I would like to think it's reflected in the quality of the product, that we've been able to help get a better thing out by having more people able to support with some of the challenges and the more interesting things the LDs want to bring to their missions.
Man.
The LD team itself, when we started on Division, it was Reflection's first third-person shooter, really. We'd worked on Watch Dogs, but we'd not been involved in the shooting or the layout in the areas where combat really happened. So we learned everything as we were going. And we did hire in people with experience to help us build on that. But through their tutelage and through us iterating and going through all those lessons, we got better. And now we've just continued that trend with everyone who's stayed on from the first division. And with that knowledge, not just of layout, but how to get the most out of Snowdrop as well, it's really just built up the team into a group of very capable LDs able to do some really amazing stuff and some of it in quite short order. Some of the prototypes they got up and running early on were mind blowing.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I think with that one then, because I heard a quote, and I can't remember who it was from. I think it was from, who was it? I think it was from someone from Square Enix, but they mentioned that working on a new IP is one of the hardest things in the industry in many ways. So I guess now, you've worked on sequels and different IPs and, reimaginings of brands as well. Did you find that it was, I don't want to use the word easier because I think that's not the right way to phrase it, but, you had a stronger base, shall we say, when you say working on a sequel compared to that of working on an original IP?
It can kind of go both ways. So
yeah,
there is the fact that you know what you're doing. So you can sit down and you can get on with the work, and that's much easier. But people often talk about in music the tricky second album. It's just you've said something and you want to do something different, but it needs to be familiar because it is still in the same game universe. It needs to not be totally different. So it kind of it's not that it brings restrictions, but it brings a bar that you've got to keep beating. And I think we cleared that bar, like in the missions we delivered. I definitely think we beat that bar, but it's that thing that's always in the back of your mind, like, is this better than that moment? How can I keep making this better? And if you're in a whole new IP, you don't have that challenge or constraint, but often there is a competitor you have to compare yourself to anyway, so it's not like it necessarily goes away, but it's not the bar that you set, so it does make it a little bit easier. You can look at the competitor and say, I'm just not going to go to exactly that space. I'm going to differentiate myself so I'm not competing on exactly the same playing field.
I think it's an interesting one. Going from that, I've never worked on a sequel, so I can't say I know with that one. And it's one of the things I now regret in a sense, in terms of like, I wonder what it'd be like, because it must be nice to have that base to understand for it. So no.
New IP is definitely a challenge, because if you're on it from the start, you've got to figure out what that gameplay is. You don't just come to a new IP with a character with guns and a bunch of actions they can do. You actually, even if you were taking an existing engine, you question everything. Is this really the game I want to make, does it fit those core pillars that I want for the franchise if I just maintain those existing mechanics? So yeah, it's still not, it's not easy doing a game. It's not easy making games, Max. I think that's the core of this. There is no easy way to make a game.
I agree, mate. I think one of the things that when I look back, and I definitely naively said when we spoke, when we worked together, was I thought having a lot of pre-production would help. Is one of my answers to solving some of the issues. And as time's gone by, one of the things that I've learned is you said there, just building out in terms of you don't just have these things, these interactions, these guns, these mechanics. What might sound good on paper may not translate well, in the actual game, and it may not actually work as a whole loop as well. It might work great for this small instance, but as a repetitive mechanic and the overall game loop, it may not work as well. So yeah, games are constantly changing as well. So I agree 100% with you on that one, mate. It's tough.
Pre-production is I find it's a weird term in this industry because pre-production is the point where you're ready to make the game. Essentially, you've got all the tools, everything you need to know, you can just churn out the game. That's if you were making a film, it translates. But you need enough of the game to prove out whether those mechanics do last, and you don't necessarily have that by pre-production. By pre-production, you can probably start answering those questions, but then once you've answered those questions, you maybe need to take a step back. And I do think that's a challenge that is more unique to games than films or other media. And I do think there's work that we as an industry can do improving that process and kind of normalizing it a bit. And I don't know how we do it. Honestly, that's a very big question.
Yeah, man, I agree. I was listening to an episode with Corey Barlog, the director on God of War, who I've got like an absolute creative crush on right now. I think he's. But one of the things that he said was really interesting as well. When he was directing, he was like, people think that you know all the answers, and as you said, you might have an answer in your head, but by the time you get to this, production, and as you said, like, there's a lot of questions that are not even answered in pre-production that should have been, or you don't even know how to answer them because maybe tech's getting developed right now as well, so you can't do the prototypes. So yeah, it's a very different cycle of things, I think, and that's always the one for that one, and
it's a bit like science, where you come to a problem with a thesis, and your thesis is, I think there's this thing called gravity because an apple hit me on the head, on the head, and that is game design in many ways. I think this will be fun because this is what I would like to play.
Yeah.
And then the science is you do an experiment. So that in some ways is pre-production. It is, can I build this out and prove that it is fun? And then what do I do with the lessons that I've learned?
Yeah, man, I agree. I also think, going back to a previous point you're saying about, new LDs that come in, no one teaches that as well. Because the fun part of making a game is the making part, and that's something that people, and documentation, which you've mentioned earlier as well, like, these things are super important and I think should be taught way earlier on so people have a better understanding. And also, as you're saying about raising generations up, someone might come up with the correct way because they've spent more time looking at it, and in an isolated area as well, while when you're making games, everything's on the go. You have to deliver it. You've got deadlines. You've got this coming at you. You've got another team wanting something from you. So I think it's important to teach that as well. Now, obviously, me and you are not any lecturers, but I think if there is any lecturers listening to the podcast, because I think a couple do, that might be an idea for them to take on and push through. So we're going to move on to the next question, which are, what are some of the improvements that you are most happy with and most memorable to you in Division 2? I'd say, why you think of an answer? One of the things that I was really impressed with when playing this one was now the introduction of the miniguns. Now, I know it's not a huge revolutionary mechanic. However, I think that does open up different terms of pacing and different kind of mission beats that you can have. And also, it makes the team feel it can strategize more because you've now got a certain new element, new toy in the mix as well, which I thought was really, really good in my opinion.
So for me, I think it's been how we've learned our lessons from the DLCs in Division 1 and been able to reapply them for launch. So like I was mentioning earlier with the bounties, by being able to design the areas so that they properly support them from the beginning means we can get maximum impact out of those spaces. And it's just great to see how those DLCs can provide a testbed for the future game. And we can just keep building on everything we know and just deliver a better product for it.
I think that builds onto another question then, is because Division, is a live game, it's a live franchise. I think that's an interesting one to switch your mindset to as well, compared to the times, and how you said it's changed a lot since you've been in the industry. Once you were done with that project, that was kind of it. Maybe there might be some DLCs, but that came a little bit later. But you used to be, it's like an open and closed book. Time's gone and on to the next. But like you're saying, in this franchise, you have to keep investing into it. And like, how has that affected and changed your mindset when working on a game now?
Well, you have to be more thorough when you're making changes. If you're just on the most basic level, if there's a prop that's getting used in the level already, you have to be either not change it at all or make sure that when you change it, you're not breaking every single instance that's already placed in the world. So it's just a lot more kind of forethought needs to go into every subsequent change that you make. And also that when you're planning a feature, you need to be much more, you need to think about it in the most open-ended way possible. I remember hearing someone talk about it. I don't know if it was on your podcast or a talk at Ubisoft, but if you're looking at developing a feature just to do the one thing you're trying to solve, it will do that. But then if you need to do something similar in future, you might find yourself kind of tied in knots like, well, I kind of have to break the original thing to get the new thing added in and working. So you just have to think long term in everything you do and modularize it in ways that you can add on to it later.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think modular design is a good way to phrase it. I think that's a good one. I was going to ask, like, how do you keep motivated going through, not just working on development time, because development time only seems to be growing, in my opinion, for such big games, but also it's now a live game. It's very different in terms of DLCs, patches, sequels. Like, how do you tend to keep yourself motivated to get through?
So I find motivation kind of comes naturally. I feel that when we're working with the LDs and they're wanting to make something cool, we're going to have to work together. There'll be level design, tech LD, art, tech art, prop art, VFX, audio, all working together with like a common vision and a common goal. And that is, for me, is really energizing, especially when you see that thing come together. But once the game's live and you see how the players are responding, you just want to to keep feeding them with more content. You want to keep making the game better for them so that they want to keep playing. And it kind of doing the job is kind of its own reward in some ways. And when you feel like that, that's when any job will be the best.
Yeah, man, I agree. Now, we are going to start to wrap this up because I've taken enough of your time, good sir,
Okay.
with it. But I just wanted to ask, I guess, one final question. If there's one kind of tidbit of advice you could give to someone who's, trying to start off, it's a very big question, broad one. What do you think would be just one little gem you'd give to them, mate?
Miss your train. Or
Alright.
it's applicable to all, right? No,
I don't think that's a mantra for life, is it? Miss your train.
no, I think. Look, it's a competitive industry, and if you're trying to get in, put together a good portfolio, get it checked. Don't just be like, it works on my machine. Send the link to someone else. Make sure it works for them too. Make sure the links work. Make sure it's just so easy. Like, a portfolio is an advert. And all the time on YouTube, when I see an advert, and I can skip that ad in 5 seconds, I will. Unless it catches me in 5 seconds. And if you can do that to your portfolio, you'll get people, you'll hook people's attention. And so show people the coolest things you've worked on, and let them know what you did. Don't just be like, hey, here's an amazing cutscene and some stuff, and I just made that little explosion in the corner or whatever. But I think once you've got an interview, have something to put in the interviewer's hand. Like, I've had 3 or 4 interviews in the past where someone said, here's the mobile game I've been working on, have a play, give me your feedback, what do you think? And you can sit and frame a discussion around that then. Like, that could be 20 minutes of an hour-long interview just done on that, and they've not got any of the hard questions. And they're building a rapport with you. Like, that's just a great, for me, that's a perfect interview. An interview where I'm sat and I've got through my 10 or 15 standard questions. We've still got 45 minutes left because you're giving, really short answers. I find those really tough. And it's not to say you wouldn't necessarily get the job, because if those answers are good, that's great. But one of the things we look for in an interview is when you fit in with the team. And if you can hold a good conversation, if you're interesting, if you're funny, if you've got hobbies you can talk about and other interests outside of games, all of that kind of stuff adds up to make you a much more interesting package than someone who's just made some good levels but can't tell you why the levels are good or what process they followed to make those levels. Those are all the kind of things we'll want to talk about. Like, when you put that big object over there in the middle of the level, what were you thinking? It might be the perfect thing to have done, but if it was an accident, or you can't say, well, it helps the player understand where they are in the space, then you might as well have not done it.
Yeah. Now, some good advice there, some good advice. So again, just thank you very much for coming on this. We spoke about it for a long time, and here you finally are.
I've enjoyed it.
The team is back, Scoop and Max, I
Well,
put your name first.
Not quite back for good, but yes, my name is where it belongs.
And they say I have an ego.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to work with you again, Max.
No,
for
vice
more
versa.
than an hour at a time.
That phrasing is all I'm going to say on that one. Phrasing, Scoop. No, I'd love to as well, mate. But we're just going to end this up. I just want to say thank you again for the time. I know people will appreciate this when it gets aired, I'm sure. So again, thank you. Do listen to this man's words of wisdom. He helped me grow up.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, again, cheers, mate. So all of you listening, thank you very much. If you do want to reach out to Scoop and ask him any more questions, where can they contact you, good sir?
On Twitter at @scoop_Cooper. And I won't promise to share any level design truth bombs or knowledge. I tend to post more about Brexit at the moment, but you'll probably see the odd retweet of Division 2 adverts and things like that as well.
Yeah. And if you want to contact me and you have any questions, you can do so on Twitter at MaxPairs, or you can email in to the leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. If you do want to support the podcast, then please do subscribe if you're going on YouTube, or rate this 5 stars, pretty please, on any podcast site that you're listening through, or even become a Patreon at patreon.com/leveldesignlobby to help grow so we get even more amazing guests like Scoop, improve the quality, and much more. So thank you all very much, and I'll catch you all next time.